Hey guys, tonight we pedal into a world of tightly cinched corsets, prim parasols, and the unmistakable whir of quiet rebellion. You're coasting down a gravel path that winds through the neatly ordered countryside of 1880s England, where every daisy seems deliberately placed, and every lady expected to behave like an over-decorated porcelain doll. But tonight, you're not just another dainty silhouette in a bonnet. You're perched atop a high-wheeled contraption part rattling death trap, part radical tool for change. There's a soft crunch under your tires as you ride past hedgerows older than your grandmother's sternest frown. A stiff breeze lifts your skirt just enough to make you blush and scandalize passing farmers. You are not supposed to be here. Not like this. You probably won't survive this ride without someone accusing you of moral collapse. And yet, the freedom feels delicious. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the dusty edge of a Victorian village, where the main road is barely more than packed dirt, rutted from carriages and hooves. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and overcooked cabbage. In this moment, you're both out of place and ahead of your time. The thing under you is called a safety bicycle, a newer, more stable evolution from the old penny-farthing monstrosity that tossed riders like rag dolls. Unlike its ridiculous older cousin, this one actually makes sense, 2 wheels of equal size. A chain drive, and most importantly, lower risk of facial destruction. But make no mistake, even this safe device is a lightning rod for gossip, judgment, and moral alarm bells. You feel the stares. Ladies aren't meant to straddle anything. Apparently especially not something that vibrates with every cobblestone. Never mind that it's your legs doing all the work, or that the mere act of pedaling has become an act of defiance. This is the age of Queen Victoria, where empire and etiquette rule with equal stiffness. You're expected to remain within your domestic sphere, to embroider quietly while sipping tepid tea, and above all to avoid exerting yourself in any way that might disturb your fragile constitution. Goodness knows your uterus might wander off in protest, but here you are, trundling down a lane with flushed cheeks and wind-tousled hair. The world isn't quite sure what to make of you. The bike beneath you is more than a mode of transport, it's a wedge in the social fabric. Historians still argue whether cycling genuinely altered the course of the women's movement, or simply mirrored broader trends. But in the moment, it feels revolutionary. You are moving under your own power. No father's carriage, no husband's permission, no chaperone rattling behind you in a disapproving cloud of lavender water. And then there's the outfit. Let's not forget the bloomers. You're wearing what they call a rational dress, a name so cautious it practically begs not to offend. It's still modest, but far more practical than the bone-crushing corsets and skirts wide enough to host a badminton tournament. These bloomers are loose-fitting trousers gathered at the ankle, and while they offer freedom of movement, they've triggered a cultural panic only slightly less intense than the French Revolution. You pass a man walking a shaggy dog, who openly gawks at your outfit like you've shown up in scandalous lace lingerie. His dog looks less concerned. Not everyone is scandalized, though a few women glance at you with cautious envy. They can't say anything, but you see the spark of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, they'll try it too. You ride on, past hedgerows and stone walls, into the open countryside where gossip can't quite keep up with your tires. The air shifts, it's cooler here. A few bees lazily buzz by, indifferent to your societal provocation. It's peaceful, almost meditative. You begin to understand why some women took to cycling, not just for transport or protest, but for escape. There's a rhythm to it. Push, glide, balance, your breath evens out. The tension from the village melts away, replaced by something quieter, steadier. You feel your body as your own, not as an ornament. Quirky fact break. Some early women cyclists believed that cycling could literally shift your internal organs, usually cited by worried male doctors. One even warned that too much time in the saddle might cause a permanent cross-eyed stare known as bicycle face. Spoiler. This was not a real condition, but if you want to fake it next time someone asks if you're ovulating on a bike ride, feel free to roll your eyes dramatically and call it that. Your path slopes gently downward now, winding through a patch of trees. Sunlight filters through the canopy in golden flecks, playing off the glint of your handlebars. You hear birdsong? a distant brook, and for a moment, you're not in rebellion, you're just riding. Simple, smooth, quiet, still. You're very much part of a larger, slow-motion upheaval. In drawing rooms and pamphlets, in whispered conversations and daring public appearances, women are beginning to push back. The bicycle has become an unlikely banner of change, one with handlebars instead of heraldry. Some contemporary thinkers, like progressive social reformer Frances Willard, embrace the symbolism with open arms. Willard even writes a book called A Wheel Within a Wheel, which links cycling with women's empowerment. She learns to ride at the age of 53. 53? The sheer audacity. Back in your lane, both figuratively and literally, you start to notice more signs of tension. A hand-painted sign on a tree reads, "No cycling on the common." You ignore it. Probably applied to the riffraff, not genteel rebels like you. Still, not everyone will ignore you. Letters to newspapers rage against the shocking spectacle of women astride vulgar machines. Preachers sermonize. Parliament chuckles. And yet, the pedals keep turning. You crest a hill now, breath-catching, thighs quietly protesting. You earned this moment, this view. Behind you, miles of dusty rebellion. Ahead, more road, more whispers, more change. And you're not just riding a bicycle. You're quietly, steadily, writing history. You coast down the hill with the kind of glee that's only half legal in Victorian England. The wind tickles your ears. And for a moment you think, maybe I should be home, embroidering something I'll never wear. But the moment passes, like the countryside flickering past in a blur of green and brown and gently scandalized pheasants. Two wheels. One scandal. That's what this is. And what a scandal it's turning out to be. The year is 1889, give or take a cobblestone. And the sight of a woman on a bicycle has gone from mildly amusing to full-blown social heresy. You're not just being watched anymore, you're being debated. At dinner tables, in newspapers, from pulpit to parliament. You glide past a small village church, where a disapproving vicar nearly drops his prayer book as you wobble by. He adjusts his spectacles like he's not sure if he's hallucinating. You offer a courteous nod and immediately regret it. Eye contact seems to count as an invitation to moral ruin. See? Here's the thing. Bicycles are loud in all the quietest ways. They rattle the peace. They shake assumptions. And worst of all, they move women. And women aren't supposed to move on their own. You're meant to be still, contained, draped in silks, transported by others, entering motion on your own terms. Unthinkable, improper, positively French. You round a bend and start up a hill, heart thumping with the effort. The climb is steep, but it's not the incline that makes your cheeks flush. It's knowing what's being said about women like you. The newspapers don't pull punches, according to one editorial. Bicycling produces a boldness of carriage incompatible with the demure reserve of womanhood. Translation: you're too confident now, and that terrifies them. Even your clothes have become battlegrounds. Bloomers, those practical puffs of defiance, are constantly under fire. You pause at the crest of the hill and catch your breath beside a hedgerow. Adjusting your cap, you remember the latest headline from the Times. A revolting fashion ladies in trousers. Makes it sound like you're some sort of insurgent fruit. Historians still argue whether the public outcry over bloomers was more about modesty or control. Was it the sight of a visible ankle, or the horror of a woman dressing for function instead of display? Either way, bloomers stuck around. And so did the fear. Nearby, a modest tea room advertises ladies welcome cyclists, kindly remove overshoes. It's a sign of the times. Businesses are trying to court the cycling crowd, but delicately, cautiously, like it might all vanish overnight if someone writes one more strongly worded letter to the editor. Quirky aside, did you know some early bicycles came with a bell and a tiny toolkit hidden in the frame? A sort of Swiss Army cycle for the Victorian gentlewoman. You ring your bell once, just because you can. A startled cow blinks slowly at you. Approval unclear, as you sip from your water flask scandalously alone. Unchaperoned, you remember the fuss over hydration. Yes, even drinking water became part of the scandal. Women were warned against overexertion, overheating, and most notably sweating. One doctor warned that female perspiration, when induced by wheeled exertion, invites weakness and moral disarray. Wheeled exertion sounds like a crime, or maybe a punk band. And then there's the saddle. You probably didn't expect to think this much about saddle design, but here we are. The late 1800s were full of men panicking over whether traditional saddles were, well, too stimulating for women. One enterprising inventor even marketed the hygienic lady's saddle. No padding, no upward pressure, just a perfectly miserable ride. Hooray for science. It's at this point in your ride that you pass another woman older, steadier, with a steely glint in her eye and a wool skirt pinned expertly at the knees. She nods. You nod. Nothing more. But the mutual recognition lingers. You're not alone. The scandal is bigger than you. Women are riding everywhere now. Slowly. At first, in twos and threes. Early adopters with stiff posture and quiet determination. They don't shout slogans. They don't burn corsets. They just ride. And the very act of doing so changes everything. Not immediately. Of course. This is still Victorian England. Nothing changes immediately. Even steam takes its time. But the presence of women on bicycles starts to poke holes in the illusion of perfect domesticity. These aren't radicals. Necessarily. They're teachers, widows, shopgirls, even debutantes sneaking off before the evening dress-up ritual. And every ride becomes a line in the footnotes of rebellion. You reach a village square now, quiet and cobbled. A group of men sit outside a pub, sipping ale and arguing about cricket. One of them glances your way. Oi, lady, you lose your horse. He calls out, grinning through crooked teeth. You smile sweetly and ring your bell again. Ding ding. Translation. I'm pedaling faster than you've walked in your entire life. They don't respond. You pedal on. Later, as the sun dips low and the road grows sleepy, you think about the absurdity of it all. How two wheels in a chain became the focus of national hysteria. How progress always sneaks in sideways, never through the front door. Always on a back lane with gravel in its teeth. Frances Willard once wrote that the bicycle taught her more about life than all her books. Balance, momentum, timing. You're beginning to see what she meant. The climb is hard, but not impossible. The ride is bumpy, but strangely addictive. And the scandal, well, it makes you smile now. Because sometimes, all it takes to tip history ever so slightly forward is the whir of spokes and the whisper of defiance beneath the linen cap. You're on the move again. Tires crunching gently over a path lined with honeysuckle and unbothered pigeons. Your bloomers are slightly dusty. Your hair's come loose from its neat pins, and there's a smear of something unidentifiable on your glove. But that's the price of quiet rebellion. You ride like you belong out here, even if half the country still isn't sure what to do with women who don't just sit still and glow. Today's journey takes a softer turn. You're not alone on this route anymore. Up ahead, you spot them half a dozen women on bicycles, scattered loosely like gossip in a drawing room. Their skirts are sensibly gathered, their cheeks a little too pink for Victorian comfort. And their laughter carries down the lane like a hymn to liberation. You've just rolled into the realm of the ladies' cycling club. Not the kind of club with gilded invites and cucumber sandwiches, though those exist too. No, this one is more subtle, formed out of necessity, stitched together by whispers, nods, and shared tea flasks. These groups have sprouted like dandelions across England, Birmingham to Brighton. Oxford to Norwich, women organizing themselves under innocent-sounding names like the Heather Club or the Lady Wheeler Society, and they're not just here for the scenery. You slow to join them, finding your rhythm among the quiet clinks of chains and occasional bursts of conversation. It's not loud, this revolution. It's neighborly, pleasant, carefully polite, but underneath the surface, something is shifting. Because these clubs, they're building networks. You ride alongside a young woman named Margaret, whose day job is as a schoolmistress. She speaks softly, her vowels crisp and scholarly. Did you know? She tells you, eyes on the road. The Duchess of Sutherland is rumored to ride in secret. Full riding trousers and everything. You blink. Royalty. In trousers? She smiles. Just enough to confirm it's more than just gossip. Not confirmed. Of course. But the Duchess has a particular fondness for outdoor activity, and our grooms are very discreet. Historians still argue whether the earliest cycling clubs were formal proto-feminist groups, or simply leisure societies with accidental consequences. What's clear is that they provided women with something precious. Safe space. A reason to leave the house. A pretext to explore. A structure that looked harmless until you looked closer. You stop with the group at a small, grassy clearing. Someone produces a tartan rug from a basket strapped to her handlebars. And out come the thermoses, lemon biscuits, and softly defiant glances. Conversation flits from recent novels to the finer points of axle lubrication. The air smells of chamomile and tire grease. Mainstream historical fact. By the 1890s, thousands of women had joined formal cycling clubs across Britain. Some sanctioned by society, others hidden in plain sight. They followed strict codes of dress, often requiring gloves, modesty panels, or even club crests. But behind those embroidered badges was a rising undercurrent of autonomy. One club near Manchester met weekly under the cover of botanical excursions. They would pack sketchbooks and magnifying glasses, then ride out under the guise of plant study. By the second cup of tea, conversation inevitably shifted to wages, voting, and why Uncle George thought women couldn't learn geography. You sip your tea and listen as another member, Edith, describes a particularly daring ride she took last month, all the way to Bath, alone but for her bicycle and a spare pair of bloomers tucked into her satchel. Her mother nearly fainted. Her father locked himself in his study. Did you go into the Roman baths? You ask. She shakes her head. Didn't dare. But I stood outside and ate a sandwich with unladylike efficiency. You clink flask. This is what passes for war stories out here. And it's not just tea and trousers. These clubs foster skills. They're informal academies of independence route planning, first aid, map reading. One group in Leeds hosts secret repair nights where women learn to fix their own brakes, patch tires, and even tune gears. No mechanics, no husbands, no asking nicely, just hands-on. Oil-streaked competence. Quirky detail, some clubs had secret hand signals not for turns or stops, but for disapproving onlookers. A raised eyebrow and a tapped knee meant gentlemen ahead. Brace for nonsense. You ride again. After the tea and the plodding, the countryside opens up in golden waves, and the group stretches out like a ribbon, each woman cycling at her own pace, but always within view. There's a gentle comfort in that. No competition. Just motion, rhythm, breath. Margaret slows beside you. We're thinking of organizing a night ride, she says, lowering her voice as though discussing contraband. Full moon. No chaperons. Your heart skips. A moonlit rebellion on wheels. But that's practically poetry. And then she grins, wicked and bright. We'll need someone to smuggle the biscuits. Of course. You volunteer immediately. As the ride winds down and the group peels off in pairs, you're left with a quiet satisfaction. These aren't radicals in the way history books tend to define them, but they're building something. A web, a map, a sisterhood. Every ride draws a new line on the canvas of change. Every shared flask or patched tire is a little act of resilience. And all of it happens quietly, persistently, like roots growing under stone. The sun leans low. You ride on alone, but not lonely. You've joined something today. Not just a club, but a current. The road ahead isn't straight, and it's certainly not paved, but it's real. And for once, it belongs to you. The next morning, you wake up sore in places you didn't know could protest. But it's a delicious kind of soreness, the ache of ownership over your own movement. There's a crumpled map beside your bed and a scuffed boot resting on your travel bag. And as the kettle warms over the coals, you're already planning your route. The morning mist lifts like a stage curtain, revealing a countryside stitched together by hedgerows, stone fences, and narrow roads that seem purpose-built for reflection. You nudge your bicycle out into the chill air. The road glistens slightly, damp but passable. A heron watches your progress with the same mild judgment you're getting used to. Today's ride is different. Less about the camaraderie and more about the terrain. You've decided to take what your borrowed cycling guidebook calls a scenic challenge. That's polite code for it. Lots of hills and zero places to pee discreetly. But this isn't just about pretty lanes and puffed up views. Today's route follows a path once tread, okay? Trundled by some of the earliest endurance rides taken by women. The newspapers called them wheel women. You'd call them quietly ungovernable. By the early 1890s, some women began taking cycling to its logical extreme, long-distance riding. Not just around the park, not even a jaunt to the neighboring town. We're talking multi-day trips, across counties, with nothing but panniers, spare stockings, and the guts to ignore 100 disapproving glances per mile. Mainstream historical fact. In 1894, Annie Londonderry famously cycled around the world. Granted, she took a ship across oceans, and let's be honest, probably accepted more than a few lifts, but the spirit of it was unmistakable. A woman, alone, navigating continents on a bicycle. That rattled cages from Boston to Bombay. You pedal up the first incline and already question your life choices. But onward, you channel Annie, with a little less global ambition and a lot more marmalade sandwiches. And this road of bumps and wet leaves and one slightly terrifying goose isn't just for sport. For many women, long-distance cycling wasn't a lark. It was liberation in motion. Take Clara, from Exeter. According to a dusty pamphlet tucked into the back of the club library, she rode 63 miles in a single day to visit her sister, dodging cattle, carts, and one moody blacksmith who tried to block her path on account of decency. She kept a log in the margins of an old cookbook. Day 3. Thighs are treasonous. Still better than the train. Quirky tidbit. Some women in cycling clubs used homemade saddle diaries small, leather-bound notebooks strapped beneath the seat where they jot down routes, meals, and mild epiphanies. One entry simply read, Saw a hawk. Named him Bertrand. Bertrand is now my spiritual advisor. You pass a mile marker carved into a leaning stone wall. 14 miles to Bristol. Not that you're headed there, but it gives you context. 14 miles is child's play to today's cyclists. Sure, but imagine doing it corseted, without modern gears. While fielding moral panic and actual cows, you descend into a wooded lane. It's quiet here, in the way libraries are quiet, deliberate, atmospheric, just loud enough for your thoughts. The bicycle clicks beneath you like a soft metronome. You think about how long it would have taken women in the past to carve this kind of freedom, one unauthorized mile at a time. Historians still argue whether women cyclists consciously saw themselves as political actors during these endurance rides. Were they challenging norms by design, or simply pursuing personal joy that happened to overlap with social change? As usual, the answer is probably yes. There's power in doing something just because you want to, especially when the world says you shouldn't. You pause near a crumbling milestone and dig into your saddlebag for a hard-boiled egg. As you eat, you imagine the women who came before leaning against stone walls, brushing the dust from their boots, swatting at bugs, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Their bikes weren't perfect. Their routes weren't mapped, but their determination, solid. And here's the quiet genius of the endurance ride. It redefined what women could cope with. Not in lecture halls or law books, but out here where it mattered. They got blisters. They got sunburned. One woman reportedly caught a beetle in her bloomers and never cycled again. But still we thank her for her service. You pass a farmhouse with a woman at the gate, apron dusted with flour, a jug of milk in one hand. She watches you a moment, nods, then turns back inside. A small moment, but it's one more mark on the map of shifting norms. Each woman who sees another doing something new, something unexpected, plants a seed. The road begins to climb again. You lean into it, muscles burning, breath short. There's a rhythm to the suffering now. You stop watching the hedgerows and start watching your knees. Up, down, down. The kind of rhythm that tells your body you are capable of far more than they said. Near the crest of the hill, a wooden signpost points toward a side lane. Farningham cyclists welcome. You grin. That wasn't always the case. In the early days, cyclists, especially women, were barred from certain establishments. Some inns put out signs, no wheels, no women in breeches. Others had rules about ladies needing male escorts or requiring written permission from a guardian to stay overnight, like an 1890s version of parental controls. But slowly, cyclists carved out their own networks. Friendly farmhouses, inns with dry stables and sympathetic landladies, a secret geography of welcome. As you turn down the lane toward Farningham, your wheels buzz on the gravel. This isn't just a joyride, it's a soft remapping of the world. The more you ride, the smaller the fear gets, and the further you go, the more you realize freedom isn't one grand gesture. It's made of tiny, ordinary choices stacked quietly together. You arrive at the inn just as the sky turns the color of faded lilacs. Your legs are jelly, your cheeks are wind-stung, and your face is set in a grin so wide it could terrify a bishop. As the landlady pours your tea, she doesn't blink at the grease on your boots or the wild frizz of your hair. She simply asks, "Long ride. Was it?" You nod. "Good on you," she says, placing the cup in front of you. No scandal, no sermon, just the comfort of being seen and accepted exactly as you are. You wake up to the sound of a rooster with boundary issues and a back that politely suggests you may have overestimated your stamina yesterday. But your tea is hot, your toast is warm, and your bicycle waits outside like a loyal co-conspirator. Today, you're not riding far, just to the next village. The air smells like wet hay and new plans, because today's about what happens when people notice. You see, by the late 1890s, cycling women had officially gone from charming novelty to deep societal concern. The newspapers couldn't get enough. Pamphlets fluttered out of presses like worried butterflies. Were bicycles safe for women's reproductive health? Would all this bouncing lead to immorality? Could the sight of ankles in motion dismantle civilization? Apparently, yes, mainstream historical fact. The backlash against women's cycling wasn't subtle. Public discourse turned feverish. Doctors issued warnings about bicycle face, a supposed affliction, where the strain of riding would leave women permanently haggard and grim-looking. Never mind that most of the men cycling around looked like flushed walruses in tweed. You pedal gently through the village center, passing the bakery, the butcher, the general store, and every head turns just slightly as you go by. Some with curiosity, some with raised brows, a few with warm nods that feel like high fives in disguise. You stop near the old post office. Not because you need to mail anything, but because it's the sort of place where news, rumors, and judgmental sighs converge. Two older ladies on a bench eye your bike. then your trousers, then your face. One leans in, whispers something, and the other chuckles not cruelly, but with the brittle mirth of someone amused by the future arriving early. Because here's the thing about cultural panic. It usually says more about the panickers than the so-called problem. You think of the anonymous letters some women cyclists received tucked into baskets, pinned to doorways, sometimes even mailed with clipped corners as a sign of disapproval. One simply read, "You will regret this before your wedding night," which, frankly, sounds more like a threat than a prediction. And then there were the cartoons. The editorial pages loved to depict lady cyclists with giant calves, comically stern faces, and always impossibly improper bloomers. Never mind that most actual women rode in layers of respectable, suffocating wool. The cartoons needed villains, and what better villain than a woman who can fix her own chain? Quirky tidbit, one widely circulated drawing in 1897 showed a woman cyclist being trailed by a pack of confused dogs and scandalized nuns. The caption read, "The modern Amazon disturbs Her Majesty's peace." It was cut out and pasted into scrapbooks across England by women, who, let's be honest, found it hilarious. Historians still argue whether this backlash was truly about bicycles or just the latest excuse to police women's independence. Probably both. After all, the bicycle wasn't just a machine, it was a metaphor on wheels. You lean against your handlebars, watching the village move around you. The butcher's boy whistles as he delivers a parcel. A little girl rides past on a tricycle, her boots flying, her bonnet crooked. Her mother watches her with a mix of pride and subtle terror. Maybe that's where it starts. Because while the press wailed about moral decay, most real people were quietly adapting. Shops started selling women's cycling gear. City councils debated bike lanes. One town even proposed a women-only cycling hour in the park, mostly to keep the fainting gentlemen from tripping over their own outrage. Still, for every small victory, there were bumps in the road, literally and metaphorically. Like the time you rode through a neighboring town and a man with a mustache the size of a ferret yelled, "Go home and sew something," which, rude, but also confusing. What if you wanted to sew a saddlebag? Or the time a vicar's wife offered to pray for your modesty, as if your calves were threatening the divine order. You thanked her and asked if she might also pray for a tailwind. She did not find that amusing. But the resistance wasn't always external. Sometimes it came from within. You remember Eleanor, one of the newer members of the club. She showed up in a full-length riding skirt, bonnet pinned tight, hands trembling as she mounted her bicycle. She whispered, "My husband said it's unladylike." Then she rode 8 miles without stopping and laughed all the way home. Later, she confessed it wasn't the riding that scared her. It was the idea of being seen doing it. And that's the real heart of the backlash. Visibility. When women ride through public spaces unaccompanied, fast, mobile, they become unignorable. The bicycle turned private resistance into public display. It was one thing to have opinions in the sitting room, quite another to have dust on your boots and wind in your hair where people can see it. So you keep riding, past the post office, past the disapproval, past the silent math people do in their heads when they see something that doesn't quite fit their idea of how the world should work. You ride because every turn of the wheel grinds down that resistance. Slowly, steadily. Not in confrontational speeches or flaming banners, but in the soft defiance of motion. And here's what they never understood. It's not just about freedom of movement. It's about freedom of self. The bicycle gave women space, physical, mental, emotional, to breathe beyond the roles they were handed like party favors. Your tires hiss across a patch of damp gravel. A shopkeeper steps out to sweep her stoop and says, "Lovely day for a ride." No sarcasm. No alarm. Just a small acknowledgement of normalcy. You nod, smile, and keep going. Some days the resistance is louder. Some days it's quieter. But the ride remains the same. Yours. Earned. Unapologetic. You take a right onto a country lane. The trees arch overhead like witnesses. The wind presses against your back. The pedals turn, assessed, and somewhere, perhaps in another village, a woman sees you and wonders if she might try it too. You crest a shallow hill with your breath rising in little clouds, and your thighs sending you increasingly urgent postcards from the land of muscle fatigue. But as you coast down the other side, the air cools. The trees part just enough for sunlight to scatter across your path. And suddenly, it feels like you've slipped into another century still yours, but touched by echoes. Because today, your wheels are taking you to a gathering. Not a rally, not a protest, something more subversive. A picnic. The cycling club's monthly ride to Willow Green. You heard about it whispered over shortbread and tea. Discussed in code like a military operation. Because what you're about to experience isn't just women on wheels. It's women together. And that's always a little dangerous. The moment you turn onto the lane leading toward the field, you see them, at least a dozen bicycles leaned like sleeping deer against the low fence. Skirts hiked over boots, baskets stuffed with jam jars and folded shawls, laughter that rolls across the grass like a soft rebellion. You walk your bicycle through the gate, and every head turns not with suspicion, but recognition. You're not the first stranger to arrive. Probably won't be the last. Someone waves you over and offers a flask of lukewarm tea before you can even introduce yourself. Mainstream historical fact. By the 1890s, all-female cycling clubs were flourishing in England. The Clarion Cycling Club, while officially co-ed, saw entire chapters informally dominated by women. Others, like the Lady Cyclists Association, catered exclusively to women and provided rare spaces where they could speak, ride, and exist outside male oversight. But here, in this sun-dappled glade with mismatched blankets and bicycles resting like loyal hounds, the club isn't just a social organization, it's a pressure valve, a reprieve, maybe even a plot. You sit on the grass and listen to the stories unfold. Beatrice, who always wears her hair in a crown braid that could survive a typhoon, describes her week dodging her employer's attempts to correct her priorities. She's a governess by day and a tireless cyclist by weekend, which she says is like living in two novels at once. Someone else mentions sneaking out before dawn just to ride alone through the mist, before the world has a chance to judge me. And then there's June. Oh, June. She pulls a boiled sweet from her pocket and says, with absolutely no preamble, I once rode 12 miles with a chicken in my pannier. Alive, too. No one questions this. Not even you. Quirky tidbit. It wasn't uncommon for women cyclists to carry pets or livestock on their bicycles, especially when heading to market or traveling between homes. One recorded anecdote details a woman smuggling a hedgehog to her niece in a shoebox strapped to her frame. The hedgehog reportedly escaped and caused a sensation in Tunbridge Wells. You sip tea from a chipped enamel cup and lean back into the grass. The women speak with ease. No topic off-limits politics. Relationships. Menstruation referred to only as the visitor. Naturally. And always clothes. Because attire remains a battleground. Someone passes around an article from a women's magazine advising against overexertion in rational dress. Everyone groans. Because rational dress loose trousers? Layered tunics. Bloomers was designed for cycling, but it was still controversial. Historians still argue whether the adoption of rational dress preceded the cycling boom or resulted from it. Did women demand freedom of movement and then find the bicycle it? Or did the bicycle force fashion to catch up? Or either way. The corset didn't stand a chance. You look around at the club members, some in skirts, others in modified knickerbockers, one gloriously outfitted in a navy velvet jacket with brass buttons, and realize this isn't about uniformity. It's about option. The right to choose what fits, what frees. Under the tree, someone tunes a battered fiddle. A waltz stumbles out of it like a drunk butterfly. Two women start a slow, lazy dance, half serious, half satirical, mostly to show off the impressive volume of their bloomers. And no one's watching with disdain. There's no male gaze here, just a shared joy in movement and mischief. You take out your sandwich and join the laughter. Your boots are muddy, your nails chipped. Your hair looks like it lost a bet, but you've never felt more at home. There's talk of next month's ride. Someone suggests an overnight trip to a ruined abbey. It's haunted, June says, licking jam from her fingers. Or it's just drafty. Either way, sounds delightful. You offer to bring extra candles. Someone else offers gin. As the sun tips toward late afternoon, the club begins to pack up. Blankets are shaken. Thermoses repacked. Someone finds a sock that doesn't belong to anyone and ceremonially names it Frederick. Frederick is now the club's mascot. And before anyone leaves, there's the ritual, the roll call of wheels. Each woman must prove she can still mount, balance, and ride a slow, deliberate lap around the willow tree. It's not a test. It's a declaration. You wait your turn, mount your bicycle, and feel every eye on you, not with judgment, but with solidarity. You ride your circle, wave once, and receive the official nod from Beatrice, who declares, you're one of us now. And just like that, you ride home slowly, full of tea and contentment, and perhaps one too many currant scones. The sky pinkens at the edges like a watercolor left in the rain. The wind smells of turned soil and distant sea, and you carry with you more than just muscle soreness and crumbs. You carry stories. You carry names. You carry the quiet knowledge that somewhere out there, scattered across fields, cities, and sleepy lanes are women like you, women who know the freedom of two wheels and the power of gathering. Not to overthrow the world with force, but to outlast it with joy. The next morning arrives with the soft clatter of rain against your window, and that gentle ache in your legs that says, "You did something brave yesterday." You stretch beneath a wool blanket, smell the faint sweetness of drying mud on your boots by the door, and hear the distant, unmistakable ding of a bicycle bell echoing down the lane. It's a signal. Really. A reminder. There's still more to ride. You bundle yourself in something that won't weep in the drizzle and wheel your bicycle outside. The sky is that pale. Bruised is sort of gray that looks like it could change moods at any moment, rather, like your Aunt Mildred after 2 sherries. But the roads are soft, and the wind is polite. So you ride on. Today, you're headed towards something less visible than willow groves and jam-stained blankets. The ripple effect. Because what started as a handful of women in bloomers soon became something far larger if still softly spoken. These were no longer just weekend jaunts or countryside rebellions. The cycling clubs were evolving. And with them, so was everything else. Mainstream historical fact. By the turn of the century, women's cycling wasn't just a hobby. It had become a force influencing public policy, city planning, and even education. Bicycle manufacturers began advertising directly to women, touting ease of use, graceful mounts, and adjustable saddles. Some brands even offered installment plans, making the bicycle more accessible to working-class women. But this accessibility wasn't always welcomed. As you ride through the narrow streets of a market town, you notice them. Stares from shopkeepers, a boy pretending not to be impressed, and a constable who frowns like your very existence has interrupted his digestive schedule. It reminds you that while bicycles were reshaping culture, they were also stirring up class boundaries in very inconvenient ways. A woman riding a bicycle was no longer easily categorized. Was she wealthy and eccentric? Was she working class and late to a shift? Was she a suffragist? A schoolteacher? A romantic poet who secretly wrote odes to her handlebars? Impossible to say at a glance, and that alone made her suspect. One woman tells you about riding past the factory gates in Newcastle and hearing a chorus of whistles, not jeers. But actual encouragement? Go on, lass. Someone shouted. She grinned until she realized her supervisor was among them, looking like he'd just swallowed a stapler. Quirky tidbit. A Scottish cycling club once sent out anonymous valentines to prominent critics of women cyclists. One simply read, "Roses are red, trousers are fine. I'll ride where I like. This freedom is mine." The verse ended with a small illustration of a very smug velocipede. Back on the road. You pass a schoolhouse where a cluster of girls press their noses to the window. They wave when they see you. One even mouths, "I'm going to ride too." Her teacher pulls the curtain. But it's too late. The spark has already landed. And that's what the clubs were doing now. Not just riding for pleasure, but for visibility, for possibility. Some began organizing charity rides, raising funds for women's shelters and literacy programs. Others focused on mentorship, pairing experienced riders with newcomers who hadn't yet learned to shift gears, literally or metaphorically. One club in Yorkshire even published a secret newsletter called The Revolving Voice. Each issue included stories from riders, mechanical advice, fashion hacks one entry, how to discreetly smuggle ginger biscuits in your bicycle gloves, and a recurring feature called Backpedals, where women confess their cycling mishaps. You remember reading one submission? Fell into a hedge. Hedge unamused. Did not apologize. Historians still argue whether these clubs were proto-political movements or simply social spaces that incidentally undermined the status quo. But as you ride past another cottage with a bicycle leaning against the fence, you start to suspect it doesn't really matter. The wheels were turning, and the changes, though subtle, were permanent. You reach a crossroads where someone has chalked an arrow onto the stone wall. Club meet. This way. It's not your club, but you follow anyway. Curiosity is stronger than rain. It leads to an old barn at the edge of a field. Inside, you find perhaps 20 women, all dripping, steaming slightly in the way only damp wool can ignite. Someone's pouring tea from a kettle balanced on bricks over a camp stove. Another woman tunes a harmonica. No one is surprised to see you. You sit on a crate, share a fig bun with a stranger, and listen. One woman older, with sharp eyes and a sharper laugh, stands and reads a letter from a club in Liverpool. They've launched a school for girls with bicycle training as part of the curriculum. The crowd cheers. Someone whispers, "We're becoming an empire." There's talk of expanding routes, of hosting a cycling fair with lessons, races, and yes, plenty of scones. A younger rider proposes forming a library of shared maps, annotated with notes about hills, pubs, and which hedgerows contain the angriest sheep. You laugh. Because, of course, nothing says radical organizing like meticulously labeled sheep. But there's seriousness here, too. A rider in a red scarf speaks about harassment on the road. Another shares her refusal to remove her knickerbockers at a hotel, even when the manager threatened to evict her. "Let him try," she said. holding up a photograph of herself and her bicycle parked triumphantly in front of the inn. And always, the conversation returns to one point: presence. Not just riding, but being seen riding. Because visibility isn't vanity, it's strategy. You ride home in the rain again, though this time it feels more like a baptism than an inconvenience. Your coat is heavy, your gloves soggy, but your heart is humming. You think of all those women damp, grinning, stubborn, and realize the revolution doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it arrives one squeaky pedal at a time. You wake early this time? No need for a bicycle bell to summon you. The rain has passed, leaving behind puddles like mirrors and air that smells of moss and old brass kettles. Your legs feel stronger now, less like protesting civilians and more like loyal infantry. Today, the road feels different. Not just softer under your wheels, but richer somehow. Like every rotation of your pedals is stirring up the past and letting it breathe. Because now, you're not just riding for yourself. You're carrying a movement. You take the longer route through the park where elderly men play chess under wool coats, and along the lane with the bakery whose window always fogs with the scent of sultana buns. A girl walking a terrier spots your bicycle and lights up. "Is it yours?" she asks. And when you nod, she practically dances. "Mom says I can have one too when I'm 11. You smile and ride on. But something lingers in your chest like warm tea. Because today, you're thinking about influence. Mainstream historical fact. The cycling craze of the 1890s didn't just change who moved where it changed. What women were allowed to imagine. The mere sight of women pedaling through towns and villages redefined public space. It wasn't just roads and paths anymore. It was theirs. Suddenly, women weren't confined to parlor rooms and side entrances. They were claiming their place on the streets, on the move, and in the open. And those watching, they noticed newspapers published editorials warning of the masculinizing effects of cycling. Clergymen sermonized against bicycle face a supposedly permanent grimace of physical strain that would render women unattractive and, presumably, unmarriageable. You chuckle imagining that argument being made with a straight face. But behind the jokes and pearl clutching was a very real fear. Women were growing harder to control. Even Queen Victoria, who famously never rode herself, reportedly admired the freedom bicycles afforded her subjects. "A lady with a wheel," one courtier noted, "is like a duchess with a dagger graceful, but alarmingly self-directed." Quirky tidbit: some women cyclists began to modify their bicycles to reflect their personalities. Handlebar tassels, seat covers made from embroidery samplers, baskets lined with poetry quotes, even small bells tuned to mimic favorite hymns. One woman was known to ride with a taxidermied owl mounted to her handlebars, a personal mascot named Winston. You imagine the club rides becoming miniature parades, each bicycle its own float, its own banner, its own cheeky commentary on the limitations being peeled back like wallpaper from a damp wall. You reach a bridge, a little humpbacked thing draped in ivy, and pause halfway across. Below, a stream murmurs over worn stones, and you think of all the places you've been lately? Not far in miles, perhaps, but far in meaning. Each ride has layered you with something new. Names, stories, stubbornness. Historians still argue whether cycling itself was the catalyst for broader feminist momentum, or merely a reflection of it. Was the bicycle the match, or just the flame that made the smoke visible? Either way, there's no denying it provided women with unprecedented mobility, geographic, social, and psychological. You cross the bridge and continue toward the village square. It's market day. Normally you'd slip past unnoticed, but not today. Today, there's a commotion in the square, not angry, not loud, just unusually focused. A group of cyclists has gathered around a lamppost where someone's tacking up a hand-painted sign. Women's Wheels Rally, Saturday at 3. All riders welcome. Bloomers encouraged. You stop and join the semicircle of spectators. One woman tall, with a voice that sounds like it once commanded a boarding school dormitory, starts explaining the plan. Not a protest. Exactly. More of a promenade. A slow, synchronized circuit of the village square. Bicycles polished. Outfits deliberately diverse. Some will wear skirts, others, bloomers. One woman jokes she'll ride in her underthings just to see who faints first. No one tells her not to. You volunteer to help hang more signs. As you hammer a second one onto a shed wall near the apothecary, you hear a young man mutter, "What's next?" "They'll want votes," without turning. You reply, "You say that like it's a bad thing." He snorts but doesn't argue. Progress, one awkward silence at a time. Later that afternoon, back at home, you write a note to a friend in a neighboring town, someone you haven't seen in years. You tell her about the club, about the rides, about the woman who painted her bicycle spokes gold because she refused to ride anything invisible. You sign off with, "You should come. We ride at dawn." Or at 10, realistically. That evening, someone delivers a flyer through your letterbox. It's from a local mechanic offering bicycle tune-ups at half price for lady riders. The bottom corner reads, "We believe in well-oiled revolutions." You pin it to your wall like a war medal, because this is the other side of influence, the echo effect. The way your wheels stir dust that drifts into someone else's lungs and makes them cough differently. The way your stubborn presence makes someone recalibrate their expectations. You fall asleep that night hearing bells, not the alarm kind, but the jubilant kind. Not everyone is cheering yet, but more are listening. And tomorrow, more will ride, and you'll be among them. Part leader, part follower, all momentum. It's the day of the rally. You wake before the sun, unusual. Since mornings aren't typically your strong suit unless bribed with tea and toast, but there's something buzzing beneath your skin. Not nerves. Exactly. More like anticipation's quieter cousin. The sky is pale and clean. You dress with a certain deliberateness, choosing your clothes not just for function, but for statement. You opt for the controversial bloomers. Of course, the ones that billow just enough to scandalize the local grocer but still allow you to mount your bicycle without turning into a performance artist. You wheel your bicycle out and head for the square. The roads are unusually empty, as if the town is holding its breath, but by the time you arrive, the air is already full of laughter, of bells, of the unmistakable scent of linseed oil and strawberry jam. They've come, dozens of them, women from your club, women from neighboring towns. Some riding alone, some in small clusters, some dressed like librarians, others like operatic pirates. One wears a waistcoat embroidered with votes for women in tiny gold thread. Another has a parrot on her handlebars. You don't ask why. You simply nod in admiration. Mainstream historical fact. Large-scale public displays by women's cycling groups became common by the early 1900s. Some served political aims like suffrage demonstrations, while others were purely for visibility. These parades challenged the notion that public space was a male domain. The spectacle of dozens or hundreds of women in motion made an indelible impression on observers, and not always a welcome one. The local constable is standing near the post office, arms folded like he's trying to hold his opinions inside his vest. You wonder if he's here to keep order or take notes. Or both. A woman with a clipboard, the unofficial organizer, begins assigning formation positions. She speaks with the calm precision of someone who once managed a bakery during a flour shortage. You're placed in the second wave, just behind a trio of teachers who have coordinated their socks to spell out freedom when they ride in a line. You all set off together, slowly at first, a gentle, synchronized rolling that feels more like choreography than cycling. People line the cobbled streets. Children sit on their parents' shoulders. Some older women wave from windows. As if remembering the time they once rode through the same streets wearing corsets, they now mock openly. One man tosses flowers into the road. A boy blows a kiss at someone and immediately blushes himself into another time zone. You ride 2 circuits of the square, then down the high street and back again. There is no music. No speech, is just motion. Continuous, proud, and impossibly quiet. And yet, it's louder than anything you've ever done. Quirky tidbit. In a similar real-life rally in Norwich, one woman trained her dog to ride in the bicycle basket with goggles on. He was considered the unofficial mascot of the club, and once interrupted a mayor's speech by barking precisely at the word conformity. After the ride, you all dismount and gather on the village green. Thermoses emerge like magic. Scones appear as if summoned by collective craving. Someone starts passing out paper fans printed with phrases like, "I break for equality and pedal like a lady." Think like a revolution. Someone else begins reading a poem, a short verse about finding strength in motion. You don't catch every word, but it doesn't matter. The rhythm is enough. It matches the thrum still lingering in your calves. Historians still argue whether events like these were carefully coordinated resistance or simply expressions of a newfound independence. But on this patch of grass, between cups of lemon tea and sideways glances of approval, you feel the truth? These women weren't just riding, they were riding themselves into the landscape. You hear laughter ripple through the group as someone retells the story of falling off their bicycle while trying to wave at a milkman. "He caught me," she says, "but the milk didn't make it." You share stories too about muddy roads, broken chains, a time you got lost and ended up joining a brass band parade by accident. They didn't notice for 2 blocks. You say everyone laughs, even the organizer, clipboard and all, but not everything is light. A young woman with a fading bruise near her collarbone says, quietly, that cycling is the only time she feels safe. Not because the roads are kind, but because moving feels like power, like escape. Everyone nods. No one asks questions. They just offer her the last scone and a spot in their riding trio. You look around and realize that while there are dozens here today, there are hundreds behind them. Invisible riders. Those who can't come. Those who came once and never again. Those who are still waiting for the right moment. The right shoes. The right kind of courage. And these rides, they're for them. 2. You stay until the sun slips sideways and the sky starts stealing back its light. Then you mount your bicycle once more and ride home alone, the wind wrapping you in its soft paper arms. You pass the bakery again. The windows are still fogged. Someone's left a plate of biscuits on the sill. Maybe for the club. Maybe for whoever's hungry. And as you turn the final corner, your legs pleasantly sore. You wonder what it would have felt like to do this 50 years earlier, or 100. And the truth is, it wouldn't have felt that different. Because in every generation, there's a woman stepping onto a bicycle for the first time, hearing the click of freedom beneath her feet. And tonight, that woman is you. The next morning comes not like a trumpet, but like a slow brewing cup of something warm and herbal. Your muscles ache, but in the satisfying way, a kind of quiet ache that makes you feel inhabited, as if every part of you now remembers where it's been. You sit by the window with your tea, legs tucked beneath a shawl, and watch a neighbor's cat attempt to stalk a pigeon with all the subtlety of a piano falling downstairs. You're not planning to ride today. Not far. At least, instead, you take out a small notebook. Its pages soft at the corners from being thumbed open too many times. You begin writing down names, not famous ones. Not even full names. Just bits. Nell, the one with the racing stripes. Elsie, who said uphill was a political metaphor. The tall one with the owl. It's a living record. And you're determined to keep it that way. Mainstream historical fact. Records of early women's cycling groups were rarely kept in formal archives. Most clubs didn't think of themselves as historically significant. The stories survived through diaries, letters, gossip columns, and eventually oral tradition. Some clubs, like the Clarion Cyclists, documented their activities with modest newsletters often passed hand to hand like secret maps. You start sketching a map of your own. The rides you've taken, where the wind felt strongest, where the pavement hummed like a lullaby, the tree stump that tried to kill you near Bridlemore Hill, the bench where you cried that one Tuesday for reasons you never fully understood but still respect. You're charting not just geography, but memory, terrain of the self, and maybe someone will find it one day and know how you moved through the world. Quirky tidbit. A fringe women's cycling group in rural Lancashire once ran a secret poetry exchange by tucking short verses into the spokes of each other's bikes. Poems had to be under 50 words and include one vegetable. The winner each month got a turnip-shaped trophy. The idea charms you. You pencil in a haiku about rutabagas and revolution. Just in case, you ride a short loop around the lane past the hedgerow where blackberries are just starting to hint at ripeness. And through the stretch of road that smells faintly of tar and sweetgrass, you let your hands drift off the handlebars for a moment, arms out like wings. Just because no one's watching. But that's not why you do it. Historians still argue whether the legacy of women's cycling clubs was absorbed into the larger suffrage movement, or simply faded as new battles emerged. The answer is blurry like most real things. Some clubs disbanded quietly. Others pivoted to new causes. A few evolved into modern organizations still advocating for women in sport and transport policy. But perhaps that's the point. Not every rebellion needs to finish with fireworks. Some end with a picnic, or a pothole, or an old bicycle tucked lovingly into a shed that smells of rust and rose hips. The true legacy of those cycling clubs might not be in the records they left, but in the habits they normalized. Women moving, choosing their own routes, arriving windblown and unapologetic. That was the real revolution. Claiming space without asking. You return home and see something that wasn't there yesterday. A new bicycle leaning against your neighbor's fence. Polished. Red. Bloomers drying nearby on the line. You grin. You know she'll join you soon. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. You spend the evening writing a letter to your younger self. Not that you'll ever send it, but the act of writing helps you see how far you've pedaled. You tell her that yes, people will stare. Some will scoff. One man will claim your uterus will fall out if you ride uphill too quickly. Spoiler, it won't. You tell her that you will fall once or twice onto grass, gravel, your own pride, but that each bruise will feel less like defeat and more like an invitation to get up, brush off, and keep going. And you close a letter with this: keep pedaling. The world is bigger than you've been told, and softer in places no map can show. Later, with the lamps low and the air cooled by a slow breeze through the window, you lie in bed and think of all the wheels turning in other places, other bedrooms, other clubhouses, other cobbled streets. Some of those riders have names you'll never know. Some are ghosts now. But all of you are joined by a chain you can't see but feel with every push forward. The chain doesn't just link pedal to wheel. It links past to present, woman to woman, dream to road. And now, as the night thickens around your room like warm velvet, your eyes start to close. It's time to coast gently into sleep. Let it all settle now. The bicycles resting in their sheds, the bloomers folded beside boots still dusted with trail grit. The village square is quiet again, the echoes of laughter and bicycle bells drifting upward, like paper lanterns on windless air. You don't need to ride anymore tonight. Let your breath follow the pace of the turning wheels. Slower now. Round and round. Each breath a revolution, smooth and calm. The energy of the day, once buzzing and bright, now begins to melt away like candle wax. Picture the path in front of you, dappled in moonlight. The only sound is the creak of the old gate and the soft hum of a breeze moving gently through tall grass. Everything is still, but nothing is stuck. The world turns, the wheels spin, and tomorrow's waiting. Kind and curious. Just up the road. Let your muscles soften. Let your eyelids grow heavier. Let the history you carry ride with you into dream space, not as weight, but as warmth. The ride doesn't end here. It just pauses, peacefully, until you wake. Good night, rider. Your rebellion can rest now.